Okay, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Karike and this is my colleague Caroline.
Hi.
We are creative practice-led researchers. So our research involves two projects, 43 Minutes and the project which followed, which is titled Sideways After 43 Minutes. Both projects occurred between March and June 2020, during the peak of the restrictions in Queensland. The research design for both projects applied a practice-led methodology. And what this means is that creative practice expression was the primary means of interrogation and also the primary means of recording or documenting our research outcomes. And we'd like to signal upfront our privileged context to be able to reflect and make art and do research during a global pandemic. As Professor Emeritus Professor Brad Hasman explains, while qualitative research typically positions practice or the artifacts of practice as the object of study, practice-led research positions practice as the lead method of research. So it's a little different probably to what you guys are doing. But the goal of practice-led research is the same as it is in other traditional more research. To explain something of significance that has broader relevance to a research community. So hopefully that makes sense.
So the main objective for both of these projects, which happened or kicked off in March 2020, was to explore and possibly resist the major characteristics and effects of neoliberal capitalism through a participatory art practice. So quite a big question, but we'll just dive down into how we explored that. So the characteristics of the project are mentioned here on the slide. The research questions were, can we reevaluate the meaning and purpose of social and economic exchanges and produce a new kind of attention to the world? And is it possible to actually cede power to people in participatory art? So we wanted to really explore, how we would do this in the art setting. So we're really interested in seeing whether that might reshape neoliberalism's emphasis on the individual and also their behaviours. So you can see here from the slide we employed what we thought was signifiers, and what came from the research were signifiers of capitalism. So things like white paint, mass-produced building materials like plasterboard, and we constructed a solid layered wall in a Brisbane gallery. The materials we used were chosen because they signal or nudge what are generally considered to be instinctive human behaviours in contemporary life that relate to capitalism. So the propensity to be productive, progress, and increase wealth, for example. And then we invited the community through our networks and through the gallery's networks and more broadly to participate in painting the wall in pairs 1,000 times for an arbitrary 43 minutes. And this was the only instruction we gave to them. So we left them in the gallery with that instruction. Obviously, well, there's a lot more to the project. We'll summarise it. So we're offering two tentative findings here from these projects. Firstly, and although this is not a new insight to many of us after going through the last year, the research taking place in a pandemic revealed, at least to us and those involved in the project, the ever-growing discomfort with capitalism, and that the driving force for capitalism, which was money and profit, was really kind of, shown up in this project more than it would have been in a normal circumstance. For us and the supporters and participants in this moment of lockdown, when we were all painting the wall, it did really start to reveal itself as a powerful demonstration of possible small modes of being that are valuable and necessary in times of adversity. Perhaps suggests a moment to generate a new paradigm, not a new normal. The second we want to offer is an understanding of behavioural responses using practice-based research. We know that the impact of behavioural responses of people in times of crisis is well documented, and we saw herd behaviours such as hoarding of food, for example, during that period. But at the same time, there is lots of research being published currently that not enough is known about the complex interplay of the changing epidemiology of the pandemic, the media attention, the control measures we all face, risk perception and public health behaviour. We offer that practice-led research may offer a way of grappling with the changes in social norms that are ongoing and behaviours in this current situation.
So the second part of the project was titled Sideways, and it came about as a direct result of social distancing measures. We were in lockdown, all of us, as we know, and we were unable to take down the wall. So normally when you have a project, you take it down afterwards, but we were stuck with a wall in the gallery. And despite the difficult circumstances of the pandemic, this gave us time to slow down, think, explore, and to innovate. And we began to think about the wall in terms of attachment, a sense of collective attachment that we all needed in that particular moment when the world was shutting down. We realised as the wall continued to stand in the gallery, a community had been established around this wall, one which we hope might collectively like to rethink and reshape our world towards new possibilities. And we were interested in the way the wall could be a signifier for this new space that had opened up. So in consultation with the gallery, we began a handover of the wall to the gallery, to the community, and to the original participants of 43 Minutes. And we established a caretaker committee to care for the wall during its and our isolation. The caretaker committee consisted of 5 individual artists plus the gallery, and only the title role of caretaker committee was prescriptive. There were no rules and regulations prescribed, and this act mimicked the hands-off deregulatory position of the state, which, as we know, in reality manifests as a combination of privatisation, isolation and dispersion, and hypervigilant surveillance of the people, as we've seen in the pandemic. So once the committee was established, we, as the Karike projects, watched on silently over a couple of Zoom calls, and in pressing the caretakers to look inwards, so away from us as the architects of the project, towards individualism, we both anticipated individualism or individualistic behaviour, but longed for a sense of resistance through collectivism. And we weren't disappointed. The committee decided that they would participate in an individual residency program to care for the wall, and they allocated themselves a week to do this. So the program started, and we were, as a collaboration, initially quite disappointed that they had chosen this really individualistic approach because it so strongly recalled neoliberalism. But what they actually did was, through their successive creative responses, responding to one another's work, was participate in this beautiful, nurturing conversation through the wall. A conversation which, without overstating it, felt radical because it embodied a collective potency and reminded us all of the sustaining value of care work. And we use the word radical here on purpose because it's derived from the Latin word radic, meaning root, in that the root of all things is our collective potency and the life-making work of care. There were less optimistic outcomes as well. Ultimately, Sideways revealed an understanding of the group's complicity in neoliberal capitalism and the futility of the project's perhaps naive intentions. So we discovered it's impossible to stand completely outside capitalism because this is the model we're stuck with. For example, Side Gallery, who was one of the residents, one of the caretakers, had a conflict over when they invited people to respond to the wall-shaped cutouts. Then they felt compelled that they needed to promote and sell them, which was, just the model, of course. And this demonstrates the problems with experimental art projects that attempt to resist capitalism whilst embedded in a capitalist framework. And ownership became an issue too. We all fell in love with this portal shape, which you can see in the top corner there. Then as restrictions started to ease, it was suddenly up for sale, owned by one of the caretaker artists. And there was no consultation either with us as the Karike projects or the caretaker committee. So it was like in an instance, we were no longer experiencing what it was like to live outside capitalism. We were right back inside the model, and it was pretty awkward.
There were many exceptions to this, well, there are some exceptions to this in the project. For example, you can see here on the slide some digital submissions made from, for example, recycled materials and rubbish. There is also various community groups. There's an Indigenous group, the lady here on the slide, that refused to sell their objects because of their attachment to the objects and the project. So, in spite of all of these findings and capitalism's presence, what we most valued about the project are the connections that have been made with one another through a profound attachment and nurturing of the wall during what we're calling our portal moment. We're bound by this experience, and the record of this is forever memorialised in the wall, its fragments and associated objects. Our collective attachment was further amplified when the project came to a close and Queensland emerged completely out of lockdown in June 2020 and returned to business as usual. Saying goodbye to our wall, our portal at this time, felt a bit difficult for us all. Thank you.